Samuel lived in a dark time in Israel's history. The period of the judges was hard on everyone because every tribe and family clan just looked after themselves. There was no unity, and everyone did whatever they wanted to do without caring at all about others. As a result, people did some very terrible things, and no one seemed to care. Enemies were able to come in and steal all they wanted because no one was willing to help anyone else. People didn't seek God, and they didn't follow His ways. Even the priests were corrupt. They abused their position to steal from others and take advantage of them. But in this difficult time, Samuel's mother prayed to God for a son. She had never been able to have a child, and she wanted desperately to give back, to contribute something of worth to the world. So God heard her prayer and gave her Samuel. In gratitude, she gave the boy back to God, devoted him to God from the moment he was born. As soon as he was old enough to eat solid food, she brought him to the high priest Eli and gave him to serve at Israel's place of worship the rest of his life. During this time, because people were not seeking God, messages from God were very rare. One night, the boy Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle, the place of worship. Perhaps he was tasked with keeping the oil lamps burning all night long, or maybe he was there to alert others if someone tried to come in and steal some of the sacred objects that were covered in gold. In the middle of the night, God called out to him by name, "Samuel!" But Samuel didn't realize it was God calling him. He assumed Eli was calling him, so he ran to Eli and asked him what he wanted. Eli told him to go back to bed. He hadn't called him. So Samuel went back to bed, and God called him again, "Samuel!" Again, Samuel ran to Eli to see what he wanted, and once more Eli told him to go back to sleep. He hadn't called. A third time God called him, and a third time Samuel ran to ask Eli what he wanted. This time Eli realized it must be God who was calling him. So he told Samuel to go back, and if he heard the call again, to answer, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." The fourth time when God called, Samuel answered the way Eli had instructed him to, and God gave him a word of warning. He told Samuel that he was about to do something in Israel that would shock people. He was going to punish Eli and his sons for abusing their position as priests, stealing from others and taking advantage of them. He was going to remove them from the priesthood. The next morning, when Eli asked him what God had said, Samuel did not hide the difficult message from him. This began a long life of hearing from God and sharing with others what God had said. God did as he had told the boy Samuel. Eli and his sons all died, and as Samuel grew up, he became the new priest and spiritual leader in Israel. He traveled around, and God used him to begin to unify the tribes of Israel once more. Eventually, God used Samuel to anoint King David to lead Israel, and God led them out of the darkest period in their history to one of the most wonderful periods of unity and growth. It is amazing what God can do through one child who is willing to listen to him, who is willing to share with others what God says. Will you draw near to God and listen to what he has to say to you? You can read this story from the life of Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 3.